provided by ODS Health Plan, the group medical plan that meets the needs of more than 600,000 Oregonians by providing a broad range of medical and dental coverage and responsive service.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington.
And I'm Roger Mudd in New York. After the news summary, we look at the state of the nation's economy as seen by Laura Tyson, chairwoman of the Council of Economic Advisors and business executives from around the nation. Then we look at the Israeli court decision in the Demyanyuk case.
New York Life is proud to provide funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour. Yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. Funding has also been provided by PepsiCo. And by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
The Israeli Supreme Court today unanimously acquitted John Demyanyuk of being the Nazi death camp guard known as Ivan the Terrible. Demyanyuk, a retired Ohio auto worker, was accused of being the brutal guard at the Treblinka camp in Poland where almost 900,000 Jews died during World War II. The court threw out his 1988 conviction and death sentence and ordered him set free. The 5 judges ruled that his guilt could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, but they said they remained convinced he had been a guard at other Nazi death camps. Demyanyuk had steadfastly argued that his accusers had mistaken him for someone else. Israel immediately ordered his deportation, but U.S. officials said he would not be allowed to return to this country. We'll have more on the story later in the program. Jim?
Israel's offensive in South Lebanon continued today. The Israeli army moved tanks and heavy armor into its self-declared security zone inside Lebanon. A long column of about 100 tanks and other armored vehicles was seen crossing the border. Cross-border artillery duels raged throughout the day. Prime Minister Rabin said the attacks would not stop until Muslim guerrillas in the region stopped firing rockets at Israel.
We will not stop this operation. Therefore, the IDF activities will be continued. There is no agreement about ceasefire.
An aide to Rabin said later the United States was trying to arrange a ceasefire. He said Israel would comply only if the U.S. could guarantee the guerrillas would stop firing rockets. At least 100 have died and 400 have been wounded in Lebanon since the Israeli offensive began Sunday. U.S. planes fired on 2 Iraqi missile sites today. The separate incidents took place after 2 Navy jets were illuminated by Iraqi radar while on patrol over the southern no-fly zone. Each plane fired a single missile at suspected surface-to-air missile sites. Both planes returned safely to the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln. Iraq issued a statement in Baghdad denying any planes had fired at its missile sites today.
Bosnia's political leaders today told their armies to stop fighting. The orders came during peace talks in Geneva, which showed some signs of progress. International mediators offered a new peace plan during today's negotiation. One intended to reconcile differences over the structure of a new Bosnia. The plan would create 3 republics known as the United Republics of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Meanwhile, in Bosnia, the leaders' ceasefire orders were largely ignored. Fighting continued throughout the country well after the orders were issued. The Clinton administration today defended the United Nations peacekeeping force in Somalia and the U.S. role in it. The UN has been accused of inciting violence in Somalia by running a military campaign against fugitive warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid. But Under-Secretary of State Peter Tarnoff told a Senate committee that stopping such an action would mean a resumption of lawlessness and a return of famine. The U.S. turned over control of the humanitarian mission in Somalia to the UN on May 5th. But the U.S. still has about 4,000 troops in the UN force.
The U.S. economy continued its slow growth in the second quarter. The Commerce Department reported today an annual growth rate of 1.6% in the April to June period. That was better than the first quarter, but much less than had been predicted by private and Federal Reserve experts. President Clinton kept the pressure on Congress to pass his budget plan. Today, he focused on raising the earned income tax credit. He invited 3 families to the White House who said they had benefited from it. Mr. Clinton said increasing the credit would help restore fairness to the nation's tax system.
This will be the first time in the history of our country when we'll be able to say that if you work 40 hours a week and you have children in your home, you will be lifted out of poverty. It is an elemental, powerful, and profound principle. It is not liberal or conservative. It should belong to no party. It ought to become part of the American creed. It's not about more governmental or social workers or more services. It's about more groceries and a car, more school clothes for the kids, and more encouragement and hope to keep doing the right thing.
House and Senate budget negotiators are expected to increase the earned income tax credit, but they might phase it in more slowly than the president proposed. General Motors Corporation today reported profits of $889 million for the second quarter. The automaker lost almost that amount in the same period a year ago. Yesterday, Ford and Chrysler also reported sharply higher earnings. We'll have much more on the economy right after this news summary.
As expected, the 18 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee today unanimously approved Ruth Bader Ginsburg's nomination to the Supreme Court. The full Senate is expected to take up the nomination within a week. The committee also began confirmation hearings for federal Judge Louis Freeh to become director of the FBI. President Clinton nominated Freeh last week after firing William Sessions. Judge Freeh told the senators the World Trade Center bombing showed the U.S. faces a growing threat from terrorism, even the use of a nuclear weapon by a terrorist nation. White House officials confirmed today they had found a note written by Deputy Consul Vincent Foster that indicated he was depressed before his apparent suicide. U.S. Park Police found Foster's body outside Washington last week. Press Secretary Dee Dee Meyer said the note was discovered Monday, ripped up and tucked in a corner of his briefcase. She would not describe it as a suicide note, but said it did reflect Foster's troubled state of mind.
Senate Republicans today kept their filibuster alive against President Clinton's national service plan. A cloture vote to stop it fell one short of the 2/3 needed. Yesterday, the House passed a scaled-down version of the plan, which would help students pay for college in exchange for community service. Another Senate vote to end debate is expected tomorrow. The Midwest was actually dry today after a rain that lasted for 6 weeks. Some floodwaters are beginning to recede, and weather forecasters predict sunny skies for the next few days. In St. Louis, people continue to shore up levees and build sandbag barriers against the waters of the Mississippi, which is still rising. The Army Corps of Engineers pumped cement into a levee that stretches 11 miles along the river. It's designed to hold back water up to 52 feet. The Mississippi is expected to crest at 48 feet in St. Louis early next week.
That ends our summary of the day's top stories. Ahead on the NewsHour, a look at the economy from Washington and around the nation, and Israel's Demyanjuk verdict.
The nation's economy is our lead story tonight, so made by government figures today, which showed things were not going as well as expected. We have a joint Washington and out there exploration of the numbers and the realities they represent. We begin in Washington with Laura Tyson, chair of President Clinton's Council of Economic Advisors. Ms. Tyson, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, the numbers today were from the Commerce Department, and they showed 1.6% growth in the second quarter. Now, that was less than what was expected, is
Absolutely. Most forecasters were in the 2.2 to 2.5, 2.6 range, so this was a disappointing number. We do, however, think that behind that number there is a silver lining. That is, there actually was some good economic news in this report, because final sales, that is what businesses were actually selling and what people were actually demanding, was moving ahead strongly. Final sales grew at 3.8%.
Final sales.
Basically, businesses can sell out of inventories, or they can sell out of current production. What happened in this quarter was, last quarter, the first quarter of this year, businesses built up a lot of inventories, and demand didn't keep up, so they had a lot of inventories. This quarter, demand picked up. We had a lot of spending. Consumer spending grew at a 3.8% annual rate. Then businesses started to sell out of their inventories. Now, what that means is, going into the next quarter, if we see this continued growth in demand, consumers wanting to spend, investors wanting to spend, then producers will pick up the pace of production and will actually employ more people and produce more output.
But what didn't happen in this quarter that was expected to happen?
Well, I think that all the uncertainty in this quarter really came around the issue of inventories because of the fact that businesses had built up so much inventory in the first quarter. Even when demand picked up, they didn't have to produce at the same pace because they could sell out of their inventories.
And they weren't sure that things were going to continue to get that good, so they haven't gone back and
so basically they have, but they produced at the 1.6 rate. But now we're very optimistic about the future because now that the inventories have been run down somewhat, and now that we have strong consumer demand, consumers really came through this quarter. We had 3.8% growth in that. Spending by producers, by businesses on fixed investment, very strong, 13.3% growth at an annual rate. That's the second highest in the last 5 years. These are very strong demand numbers. This should encourage producers going into the next quarter to pick up the pace of production, pick up employment.
And yet, just yesterday, IBM announced it was laying off another 35,000 people and closing down some things. How does that fit into all of this? And then you have, of course, you have the good news from the automakers that I just reported
exactly,
in the news
yes.
summary.
In fact, a great strength of the second quarter of this year was in auto sales. This was a very strong part of consumer spending. Auto producers were able to sell out of their inventories. It was a very strong quarter for auto producers, and it's not surprising. I saw that in the report, and I wasn't surprised by the change in their profitability situation. As far as IBM is concerned, let me say that in a growing economy, there will always be some changes in restructuring. IBM has been basically restructuring to try to face a very changed consumer market, competition coming from a wide range of producers. So that restructuring will go on whether the economy grows quickly or slowly.
So the IBM thing should be seen as an IBM problem rather than an economic problem.
I think to see it as a change in the way the computer market is functioning, that basically the large mainframe computer giant that IBM once was, IBM has to compete in the personal computer market, in the workstation market. There's a lot of new competition out there for IBM, and it is restructuring. A number of American companies and a number of American industries have gone through a restructuring process. That restructuring process has made them more competitive, and if we can generate a robust recovery on the basis of having the right deficit reduction plan, the right economic mechanism in place, then the restructured companies will be able to do that much better.
Okay. Well, look, let's open this up now and go out into the country with 5 views from people who are on the economic front line, so to speak. And William Schack, Jr. is CEO of Schack Woods & Associates, a company that owns 5 car dealerships in Southern California. Cars is what we were just talking about. Mr. Schack, is the car business at your level doing as well as it is apparently in Detroit?
Not in California. We've reduced the size of my business from 9 dealerships to 5. Even sales currently year-to-date in California are 9% ahead of last year versus nationally for Ford Motor Company at 16%. We're not doing as well as Ford Motor Company as a company and as dealers are across the country.
And you think that's a special problem, or you know that's a special problem in Southern California, is that right?
Yes, it is, because unemployment is up in Southern California. I see businesses leaving as IBM. I see unemployment down, the employment of people down, and I don't see any clear indication in the president's plan that shows me where there will be any immediate gains in employment. Mm-hmm. And I've suffered through the last 3 years. I was hopeful of some immediate cure for our problems, and I don't see that in the plan.
We'll get to the president's plan in a minute, but just as you look just at what's happening in your own backyard in Southern California, do you feel that you're down to 5 dealerships and you've laid off a lot of people? Do you see any immediate prospect that you're going to grow back?
No, I don't. I think it'll be a slow process. I'm hopeful that we'll go back. I have faith in the future, but I don't see any immediate recovery.
Ms. Johnson, is Southern California a special case?
Well, I do think that California has some special problems. In particular, a lot of Southern California has been very adversely affected by the impact of defense cutbacks. There's simply no doubt about that. California had a very booming decade in the 1980s, in part fueled by defense buildups, and in that area of Southern California, defense cutbacks have been an important issue. Also, if you look nationally, we actually have had reasonably strong job growth over the past 5 months. If you look at the average number of payroll jobs added in this economy over the last 5 months, it's been about 163,000 a month. That compares to 45,000 a month under Bush. So we really are on a more rapid recovery phase. We would like more. We wanted to have a stimulus. We wanted to do something up front, but of course that was a defeat which the Republicans handed to the economy, I would say.
We have another voice from California. It's the voice of Kirk Rabb, who's president and CEO of Genentech Incorporated, a biotechnology company located in South San Francisco. He was among a group of businessmen who were in Washington and met with the president yesterday. Mr. Rabb, is the situation any different in Northern California than it is in Southern California?
Well, we have plenty of problems in Northern California, but I think our industry, the biotechnology industry, is an example of really the future of California. And it's a growing industry, about 18% increase in employment per year. And it's an industry that employs a diverse group of people with rather high wages. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity, not just for California, but for our nation, to have our industry contribute to its improved economy.
You mean it's protected from the bad economic situation in California?
Oh, you know, it's fundamentally driven by the science and technology, much of it which comes out of our academic institutions in California, and the environment and culture is ideal for the type of profound research and development that we do in our industry.
What about your company specifically? What has been your experience these last 2-3 years?
Well, our company has grown between 10 and 20% in employment per year, and we expect to continue growing significantly. We've invested well over $100 million a year in capital in California, and I think to the point of yesterday's meeting at the White House that it's very important that the Congress pass the President's budget package. There are many elements from the industrial stimulus point of view that are fundamental, the R&D tax credit, targeted capital gains that are going to foment our industry.
Okay, we'll come back again. We're going to talk about that in detail in a moment, but I want to move to Carlton Guthrie, who's chairman and CEO of TrueMark Incorporated, which is an auto parts manufacturer and supplier based in Lansing, Michigan. Mr. Guthrie, your fortunes are obviously tied to the auto industry, as are Mr. Shack's in Los Angeles. What's happening to you right now?
Well, we're picking up. The automotive industry fairly well led the downturn earlier.
Last time we talked to you, you were hurting.
Yeah, you're right, and I'm still hurting, but I'm hurting now because we have a lot of volume. We are fortunate enough to be tied to some fairly successful car models: Ford, Explorer, Chrysler New LH program. Both Ford and Chrysler have been doing dramatically well over the last few quarters. And from our perspective, things are kicking fairly well. I think the automotive industry has enjoyed a lot of benefit from the rise in the yen, the fall in the dollar, but also from the fact that the product right now is a lot more competitive. The excellent product that the market is responding very well to.
Trace what this has done to your company in terms of from any way you measure it, in terms of employees or whatever, what this has done for you.
Well, our employee base has doubled in the last year and a half.
Doubled? From what to what?
We're now employing 400 people. We were 200 employees as recent as March of last year. Our sales volume has grown 35% in the past year, primarily on the strength of the new models. However, if you look at our entire base business, you see pickup primarily in the light truck market. Ford's light truck offerings are outstanding. Chrysler has a new product coming to the market that's selling very well. And those are some of the car lines right now that the American marketplace is jumping on, and has a dramatic impact on our business.
What about just in your area of Lansing, Michigan, and outside your immediate business? What's your feel about what the economy is doing?
Not a whole heck of a lot. The rebound in the economy has been pretty well targeted to certain automotive suppliers. I might add that within the automotive industry, a lot of suppliers are still in essence having a severe time dealing with the recession because they're not on the right car lines, they're not tied to the right suppliers. And generally, within the Lansing area, there's still a malaise in the marketplace. This economy in Lansing area is primarily based on Oldsmobile, the state government, Michigan State University, and service industries. And those are not growth industries these days.
Yeah. So, as you said earlier, Ms. Tyson, there are some industries, no matter what the economy is doing, there are always going to be pockets of hurt.
Mm-hmm. Well, for example, take the auto industry, where I think there is a strong cyclical recovery going on here, and it was really driven by consumers' willingness to go out and buy new cars, in part because the interest cost of doing that. I mean, interest rates do, when they do come down, do affect certain kinds of spending decisions more than others. So buying a consumer durable like an automobile can be affected by the interest rate that you have to pay. Within the auto industry, certain companies have been restructuring for a while, have responded much more effectively to Japanese competition, and they are in there with winning models. Now, when the market recovers, they are right there to take advantage of the opportunity of a growing economy.
Okay, to another whole area of consumer buying, we go to New York, to Sally Frame, K6 chairman and CEO of Ann Taylor, a chain of women's clothing stores in 38 states. What are consumers doing with and to your products?
Well, actually, we have been rather encouraged because our business has been relatively strong and well-balanced across the country. But clearly, the consumer is very cautious, very highly selective, and also very much aware of the value-quality quotient. Clearly, she is not always buying the cheapest product, but she does understand about what product should be worth. So she's not necessarily looking for a deal, but is very selective in what she is picking up in our stores.
So I understand you say it's not better or worse in any particular part. You've got stores all over the country.
Yeah, and that's been rather encouraging to watch and see this across the country. Our businesses remain strong. Where we have had some weakness, it's usually been a management issue, not an economic issue. And this has been very encouraging for us because at least we know our business is well balanced right now.
Explain what you meant by cautiousness you're seeing in consumers. What are they doing that they didn't do before?
Well, in terms of our business, we're finding we dropped prices about 15% last year. I believe very strongly that the consumer...
Without losing money?
Without losing money. And what we did was, in fact, we've got more unit transactions now. Our comparable store business, which is one retail measurement, is well up over 5% to last year. And June and July is coming on relatively well. So what we're looking at is a consumer who, in a sense, knows what things should be worth. We repriced the company downward 15%, but we've done a lot better on the quality, sourcing, and manufacturing end of it, both on and offshore. So this has been very good for our business.
In other words, you are supplying the same basic product at a cheaper price to you and thus to the consumer?
Right, and better quality, because we're planning better. I think we made some significant changes in how we source, quality specifications. We brought on production people so we could do a better job of producing a better product at a lower price, and it certainly is working. It's interesting, there's a saying, my husband's from one of the Baltic states, and they say something there, I'm too poor to buy cheap. And what we're finding in our business is, though people may be somewhat concerned, they do know good value, and it isn't always the cheapest product, which is working in our behalf and in our favor.
When you look forward now, as you must with a national company like this, well, everybody does, but particularly with a national company, what do you see? I mean, are you planning to expand Ann Taylor, or to sit for a while and see what happens?
No, we're going to add on. We've got a base of about 1 million square feet, 950,000. We're adding on well over 100,000 square feet of retailing this year, including new locations, expanding existing locations. So we are investing in our stores, in our growth, and in our expansion. And everything we've been doing over the past 6 months in that direction is working. So we're quite confident that our strategies are right. Certainly there's always that reluctance. I guess the most difficult thing is when the consumer does not feel as confident as she did sometime around mid-May. It's felt immediately in the business. We have to reassess our strategies, and we come back out again. So there is ups and downs.
Did you have any, what do you think, how do you explain what happened in May? What do you think that was, a psychological thing?
Well, our business was very strong in May, in fact, far stronger than we imagined. But I did see in June a slowdown, but coming in July again, it's coming back. Our running rates have picked up again, which are very encouraging. So we take it 1 month at a time. We are keeping our inventories fairly tight, and we're trying to be much more specific and targeted in the product we're carrying. We're working a lot harder, I can assure you, than I've ever worked in 30 years.
Okay. Any comment on
Well, I think there were two really good pieces, maybe three pieces of good news in that from the point of view of the economy. One is the regional balance, that we do believe that as the economy picks up some strength in spending, our evidence also is it's fairly widespread. You have some special problem areas, and Southern California is certainly one of them, but widespread. Second of all, the good news on inflation. I mean, the fact that Ann Taylor and other producers are keeping control on costs and dropping prices reflected in a reduction in the inflation rate number that came with this GDP report. Concerns about inflation at the beginning of the year seem now to be well under control. Inflation looks to be well under control. That's very good news. And finally, her investment. I mean, one of the strengths of the economy showing up in this number was the willingness of businesses to build new structures, invest in new computers, buy new production equipment. That's very good news.
At the beginning, yeah.
Right. So.
Okay, well, finally, now let's go to Elizabeth Fisher, who owns a small construction company in Dover, New Hampshire. How are things in New Hampshire? New Hampshire's had some really tough times. Is it any better up there?
Oh, absolutely. We are cautiously optimistic. There is activity. There are houses being built. There is renovation that's going on. There is a very brisk real estate business. Several of the vendors in our area report several homes being sold on a daily basis, and that's encouraging. I think a lot of that is fueled by low interest rates, but I think it's also fueled by pent-up demand.
I mean, people just have been, they had the money and didn't spend it, or they didn't have it, now they have it and they're going to go do it, or they're rolling the dice. What do you think?
Well, no, I think that they perhaps had the money and didn't spend it because they were very cautious about what was going to happen with their jobs. I think also through this recession, I hope that we've all learned a lesson that we need to save. And so there is an indication that people are saving more and are able to put money down on housing. Also, prices have dropped considerably in this area, and so it's easier to get into housing. There's still an affordability problem for subsegments of the economy, but for the most part, if you are interested in buying a house, first-time home buyer, there is plenty of opportunity out there. Actually, we're running out of good products to sell.
How's your business?
My business is doing very well. A lot of what I do is in the rental aspect, and I've seen...
You mean you manage in addition to building new stuff?
Own and manage property. And I found that the market has firmed up considerably. We do a lot of student housing. We do also a lot of family housing. The phone is ringing. People are looking for housing, and it's very encouraging. 18 months ago, it was kind of quiet around the office.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to, all five of you, back and forth now with Ms. Tyson on this basic question about the budget package. Beginning with you, Mr. Schacht, because you said you didn't think much of it. This thing is being argued about here in Washington. Do you see that as an important factor in your life and in the economy of Southern California, whatever happens?
Well, yes, I do, but my problem with it is I don't see an immediate impact as it will affect me and my business. I need help now. As I said, I've reduced and I've cut back as my counterpart did with the closing concern. But you can only cut back so far, and a business of my size can't cut back into a profit. The only thing that can fuel me and help the situation that I'm in now is employment. The more people to work, more people buy cars. The more cars that are bought, the better I'll do. And that's my immediate problem, and I need some immediate help with that.
Mr. Rabb, you said after your visit to Washington that you supported what the president wants and you want the Congress to enact this. What do you see in that plan that Mr. Schacht doesn't see?
Well, I think there are two elements. It's the incentives fundamentally for industry to invest and expand, particularly in research and development. I think these are areas which short and long term are going to replace the defense industry that so has affected California in particular. Healthcare in California represents about 1% of the total employment, and interesting, defense is about 1.6%. The movie industry is about 1.2%. The Brookings Institute just showed some numbers that based on the R&D tax credit, it could bring about $500 million of investment and benefit to the economy which could equate to almost 10,000 high-paying jobs. So I think there are substantive things in the package.
Mr. Guthrie, do you see things there that will help the automobile business, not only for you, but also for Mr. Schack in L.A.?
Well, possibly. Two issues. One, consumer confidence. Without a higher level of consumer confidence nationwide, people will not buy cars. And you may have noted that consumer confidence numbers have been going down dramatically over the last few months. If this bill is not passed, if we continue to see gridlock in Congress, I think consumer confidence is going to continue to plummet, and that's going to hurt every industry. Second point, though, is interest rates. And while that's not a direct result of the budget, the plan that the president is putting together, we need to make sure that we manage the interest rate issue such that we don't have rapidly increasing interest rates. And I'm a little concerned as to the coordination of fiscal policy and monetary policy here so that we do have a long-term process by coordinating those two policy tools as opposed to them working in conflict. And I see that as a possibility going forward.
Ms. Kasich, is there any relevance to what's happening in Washington to your business?
I think it goes back to the consumer confidence. As I said earlier, our consumer is cautious. And if we see any decline in that, she will stop shopping. And we've seen it happen before, and I think that's our major concern. And I think it gets back to, I think the word gridlock was used before. I think it's really, where's the leadership? What do we look to? What's the next? Where's the future? And I think more than just the tax package or the president's package is where are we going next? I think we're generally a country of optimists, but right now I don't see a lot of optimism. I see a lot of confusion, and I think that's always dangerous to make plans going forward.
Ms. Fisher in New Hampshire, would you agree it's less important with your colleagues? It's less important now what is, Mr. Schack might disagree with this, but the others, it's less important what is done that something is done. How do you feel about that? In other words, the psychology of confidence that is lacking right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's a major problem, the gridlock that goes on in Congress, to the point that in talking with people in the business, we just kind of throw up our hands and rely on our own ingenuity and our resiliency to come back and build our businesses and carry forth. If we waited for the federal government to bail us out of the situation, then we would be long out of business before that would happen. I think it's critical, though, that they have a handle on this interest rate issue, because that is a major component in the success or failure of the real estate industry and the construction industry.
Ms. Dyson, the voice of business out there, they don't trust Washington to solve their problems.
Well, I think they...
I think I've oversimplified what they've said, but not much.
I think they've all made it very clear. I mean, and I think that it's a voice that's now coming through the polls as well. The American people want to see something done. They know that there's a package on the table for deficit reduction. I think we have succeeded now in getting out the message that it is in anticipation of such a package being passed that we have seen this wonderful development in long-term interest rates, which has helped a number of these industries really move to see increasing demand. So it's very important that we consolidate this. So I would say the gridlock issue really is a two-part issue. We've got to get confidence. We've got to get the confidence of the American people that we have the economy under control, and we have to retain the interest rate benefits that we've achieved in anticipation.
Mr. Guthrie in Lansing said he doesn't think there's enough coordination between what you all are doing in the executive branch and what the Federal Reserve is doing on interest rates.
Okay, well, here's what I'd say. Our package, and this is sort of the financial markets have widely accorded us credit for anticipation of deficit reduction of about $500 billion over 5 years, which is our package, has brought the long-term interest rates down, the long end of the market when you borrow long-term. And those interest rates are the most directly affected by what we can do at the federal level. If we cut back what the government borrows over time, which is what deficit reduction is all about, if the government borrows less, interest rates go down for other borrowers.
Because there's less demand on money available.
Right, there's less demand on money available. So consumers can get it to buy houses, they can get it to buy cars, businesses can get it to buy new computers, businesses can get it to invest in research and development. So it helps the economy across the board. There are also short-term interest rates out there, and those are under the Federal Reserve's control, and also they respond to short-term inflation measures. Well, the good news in this GDP report is that short-term inflation is lower. And so the odds that short-term interest rates will go up, I think, just 2 weeks ago, people were speculating short-term rates might go up, might go up, might go up. This is a very good news report indicating that inflation's not picking up, it's going down. Therefore, short-term interest rates are unlikely to go up.
With a good news report, we will end it there. Thank you to you, Ms. Tyson, and all 5 of you out there in the country. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Next tonight, the Demjanjuk case and whether the man once convicted of being Ivan the Terrible of the Treblinka death camp, now acquitted though, should be allowed to return to the United States. Demjanjuk, who was born in Ukraine, emigrated to the United States in 1952, became a citizen 6 years later. He lived in Cleveland for 30 more years until he was extradited to stand trial in Israel. There, he was convicted of war crimes and sentenced to death. The High Court reversed that sentence today and ordered Demjanjuk set free, thereby raising the question whether he can now come back to the United States where his family still lives. We'll take up the argument of Demjanjuk's possible return to this country in a moment, but first a background report from Kent Barker of Independent Television News.
16 years after being branded Ivan the Terrible of the Treblinka death camp, John Demjanjuk was today acquitted by Israel's Supreme Court.
We acquit the appellant on grounds of doubt of the charges attributed to him in the indictment sheet, which pertain to his identity and actions in the extermination camp Treblinka as the person referred to in this camp as a Wachman, known as Ivan the Terrible.
I miss my wife, I miss my family, I miss my grandkids. I want to go home.
The crucial evidence at his initial trial had been the identification by 5 survivors of Treblinka. They were shown a set of photographs which included Demjanjuk's, and immediately they identified him as Ivan.
Here he is, just the way he is. Here he is, right in this very hall. This is he.
This is Ivan. Ivan the Terrible of Treblinka. I recognized him from the first look. Immediately, Your Honor, without a shadow of doubt.
It all hinged on eyewitness identifications in very emotional circumstances. And that's where the whole case has unraveled. And since that time, evidence has come, surprisingly perhaps, from KGB sources in Russia to show that Ivan the Terrible was really a man called Marchenko, that he ended up in Yugoslavia at the end of the war and then disappeared off the face of the earth, as far as we know, but that John Demjanjuk was not Ivan the Terrible.
The confusion over identity shows all too clearly the problems of tracking people down nearly 50 years after the momentous upheavals of the Second World War. With the German army's rapid movement through Poland and its success against the Soviets, thousands have become untraceable. 3 separate versions of Demjanjuk's history have emerged. First, there's his own story. He claims that between 1936 and 1943, he was a farmer in Sobibor in Poland. Then he says he was held as a prisoner of war at Rovno in the Ukraine, and then at Helm in Poland. In 1944, he says he joined the Russian National Army, fighting with the Germans in Austria. The Israeli prosecution had a different version. They said that in 1942, Demjanjuk was in the Soviet army, captured by the Germans in Crimea. He then trained as a guard for the Nazis at Trątki in Poland before being assigned to guard duty at Treblinka. There, they said, he ran the gas chambers in which 850,000 Jews died. Evidence from the appeal suggests the truth is more likely to be that in 1942 he was captured by the Germans in Crimea, but the following year became an SS auxiliary in the Sobibor death camp. Then in 1944 he moved to the Flossenburg concentration camp. There's one curious similarity between 2 of these versions. Demjanjuk's claim to be a farmer in Sobibor, the same place the Nazis set up an extermination camp. Thousands of soldiers in the Soviet army were captured by the Germans, and certainly some Ukrainians were trained and used as guards in concentration camps. But now there's even doubt about whether Demjanjuk was one of them. Although it was part of the evidence that acquitted him as being Ivan the Terrible of Treblinka, the identity card produced in the Soviet Union that put Demjanjuk in Sobibor could have been a forgery, according to forensic experts. Today, Treblinka serves as a memorial to those who died in the gas chambers. The Ivan the Terrible who brutally took their lives may still be alive and free, as may hundreds of other war criminals. Should the failure of the Demjanjuk trial mean prosecution should no longer be attempted?
I think because of the Israeli case, there might be a prejudice against the prosecution, because it would be recently alive in the minds of the jurors that in Israel there had very nearly been a grave miscarriage of justice.
In Israel, after Demjanjuk's acquittal today, survivors of Treblinka were in no doubt that the real Ivan the Terrible must be found and brought to trial.
Demjanjuk's American lawyers today began legal proceedings to get their client readmitted to the United States. Earlier today, Betty Ann Bowser talked with one of Demjanjuk's lawyers, Michael Tiger, who is a law professor at the University of Texas. He said today's court decision was a much-deserved repudiation of how the U.S. Justice Department handled the case.
I don't think that the decision will abate the legitimate concern with finding and prosecuting, where appropriate, those who were involved in Nazi atrocities. That's not what this case is about. This case is about fairness. This case is about the fact that although the United States Justice Department possessed literally a dozen clear-cut indications that they had the wrong person, they continued against John Demjanjuk. This is about the fact that there were in what's now the former Soviet Union, in archives, statements that finally cleared Demjanjuk, statements that diligent and persistent requests from the United States would have uncovered much earlier, because it was the Americans who made this case and brought it to the Israelis. So that's the lesson.
Why would the United States government want to continue with the case when they thought they had the wrong guy?
I have not been able to answer the question why, because I can't look into the minds of these folks. I think it's enough to say government lawyers have a duty. They have a duty of honesty, a duty to produce exculpatory evidence to people that are on the other side of the litigation, a duty to follow the rules. In their zeal, they failed to live up to those duties. The allegation was that John Demjanjuk was Ivan the Terrible. There was an Ivan the Terrible, and there was a Holocaust. Whoever was Ivan the Terrible was one of the most brutal mass murderers of this or any other time. It is understandable, but not in our procedural system forgivable, that someone who thought he had this true phenomenon of unprecedented guilt in his hand to want to drive on regardless of the warning.
We now turn to two guests to get their views on the impact of today's decision by Israel's Supreme Court and the U.S. Justice Department's decision to bar John Demjanjuk from returning to the United States. Abraham H. Foxman is the National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, which is an international organization fighting anti-Semitism. Frederick Dannon is a staff writer for the New Yorker magazine who covered the case of John Demjanjuk for Vanity Fair. You have both called today's acquittal remarkable and extraordinary. Mr. Foxman, why?
I think it's extraordinary that the Supreme Court of the State of Israel, the nation that rose on the ashes of 6 million victims of Nazism, established by 1/3 Holocaust survivors 50 years later, was able to look at a Nazi war criminal, and because there was doubt as to the degree of his involvement in the final solution, was able to issue forth justice tempered with mercy rather than justice tempered with vengeance. That's extraordinary. It's a magnificent day for justice and democracy.
Mr. Dannon?
I can't compete with Mr. Foxman's eloquence on that subject, so I'm just going to echo what he said. But I would add to that the fact that the court had the courage to say to 5 survivors of a death camp, your testimony was very moving and very emotional, but we believe that there's reason to believe you were mistaken in your identification. That took a lot of courage.
Do you agree with Professor Tiger, or Mr. Tiger, that this case is a matter of fairness? Is that the issue?
There's more to it than that. I think it's also a question of competence. What this case was really about was about sloppy police work. And if you want, I'll explain what I mean.
Whose police?
The Israeli police.
Yeah.
Well, the case really begins back in 1976 when the State of Israel tried to find eyewitnesses to pin Demjanjuk to charges that he was a guard at Sobibor, which are now the charges that most of us believe are valid.
But charges he was not tried on.
That's correct. Charges that he was not extradited on and charges he was not tried on. In trying to prepare that case, they put together a photo spread with his picture and a picture of a suspect from Treblinka. Now, Sobibor and Treblinka were two death camps in Poland set up under Operation Reinhardt.
Close to each other?
Within 60 miles of each other, I believe. Is that right? Yeah. And the Treblinka suspect was a man named Fedorenko, who was also a naturalized American citizen. The Israeli police committed two very serious procedural mistakes. First, they published the names of the suspects in the newspaper as follows. They said, "We're conducting an investigation into the Ukrainians Ivan Demyanuk and Fedor Fedorenko. Survivors of Sobibor and Treblinka are asked to come to police headquarters." So what happened? Watch what happens. The survivors of Treblinka think they're being summoned to identify the Ukrainian named Ivan. They only knew of one Ukrainian named Ivan. That was Ivan the Terrible. They never knew his last name. That was mistake number one. Mistake number two, they get to police headquarters, and the photo spread is the most suggestive photo spread in history. The picture of Demyanuk is twice the size of the other pictures. It's twice as sharp. Your eye goes right to that picture. Those eyewitnesses were misled into thinking that was Ivan the Terrible.
What about Mr. Tiger's point that he suggested that there was some faulty police work at the Justice Department in Washington?
Well, let's even assume,
that led to the
let's
deportation.
assume that there was sloppy police work. Let's assume that there was faulty police work. Let's also not forget that maybe, as the court today ruled, there isn't sufficient proof to say that Mr. Demyanuk is Ivan the Terrible. He's not Ivan the Innocent. He's not Ivan the Good. He is Ivan the Bad. The reason he's in this pickle, the reason he's in this situation is because he lied. What did he lie about? He didn't lie about what school he went to. He lied about where he was during the war. That's why he was denaturalized. That's why he was deported. That's what made it possible for Israel to ask for extradition. He lied about where he was during the war in order to get into this country, and he lied about his participation, whether it was Treblinka or Sobibor or Tavniki. Almost as, there's a technicality. This man participated in the final solution. The sloppy work that we're talking about, which may well be, today was dealt with. It was dealt with that this man was removed from the threat of hanging. But he is not, again, this innocent man picked up from the street. This man has a record. This man participated, volunteered even for the effort of killing Jews.
So, but he's not. He's been acquitted on the charge that he was Ivan the Terrible of Treblinka. He's not been convicted of anything else. So the question is, based on that, should he be readmitted to the United States, having been acquitted of the only charge he's been accused of?
Would you like me to answer?
Sure, you bet.
This is where I think I'm going to disagree with my colleague here. I think he should be allowed back in the United States, at least temporarily, so that he can continue to pursue a case that's still in progress. And that has to do with whether our Justice Department committed a fraud on the court in preparing its case against Demyanuk.
Strong words.
No. Those are the...
You believe it was a fraud?
Well, let me answer it this way. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which was the court that upheld the denaturalization, deportation, extradition...
That takes care of Cleveland, where Demyanuk was residing. Precisely.
On its own, because of questions raised about the conduct of the Justice Department, last summer, appointed a special master, a judge named Thomas Weissman, to look into the matter. Weissman produced his findings about a month ago, and he found that there was not fraud on the court. I've read his decision. It's almost 200 pages long. It's very brilliantly written. I don't happen to agree with it entirely. I think there's one extremely troubling thing that the Justice Department did in preparing this case that needs to be looked into further, and that is that a piece of exculpatory evidence, that is evidence that tended to exonerate Demyanuk of the charge of being Ivan the Terrible, was literally thrown in the garbage by the Justice Department, wound up in a dumpster outside of a McDonald's restaurant on K Street in Washington, and was recovered under circumstances too amazing to explain.
What was the evidence? What was the piece?
It was a memo, actually two memos by two historians who had interviewed a man named Otto Horn, who had been a nurse at Treblinka. Otto Horn was the only German SS man who ever placed Demyanuk at Treblinka. According to the historians who were there when he was first deposed, he was unable to identify Demyanuk from two stacks of photographs. In fact, he picked someone else. But when he gave his testimony on videotape that the Justice Department provided to Israel, he said just the opposite, that he had immediately identified Demjanjuk from the photographs. This is very serious exculpatory evidence. In a criminal case in America, that would be called Brady material. And to destroy Brady material is grounds for a reversal of a conviction.
Okay, let Mr. Foxman, because he was clucking at your description of fraud. Go ahead.
Well, this is the point. First of all, Master Wiseman, in his last sentence of the 210-page decision, says, because of Tronicki allegations formed an independent ground for Demjanjuk's denaturalization and deportation, therefore the judgment was a sound one. It was not decided in this country, never intended to decide whether or not Mr. Demjanjuk was Ivan the Terrible. That was dealt with after extradition in the state of Israel. And today, they said he may not be. What was decided by our courts, and therefore what they threw in the dumpster or didn't throw in the dumpster, is almost irrelevant. He was stripped of his citizenship. He was denaturalized and deported because he lied. Lied about two things. So maybe he didn't lie about Treblinka. He lied about Sobibor and Tronicki. He lied about his participation in the SS units, which according to the Holtzman Amendment qualifies him for deportation. So that's what he thought. He could have been in the Ukraine. He should be thankful that the United States didn't send him to the Ukraine. Fedorenko was put up against the wall and shot. He should say thank you that Israel took him, judged him, gave him justice, and he's alive. But not to the U.S. He's been here for 30 years. That's more than he deserves.
Okay, so let me ask Mr. Foxman, so you don't think he ought to be readmitted?
Absolutely not.
What do you think ought to happen to him?
Well, he's got to look for a place that will take him. Other people who have been
countries raising their hands.
And Ukraine may. There are countries that have taken people of his ilk. Not this country. He lived 30 years in this country as a lie. He lived under a protection by lying to get in here. I think that's enough. I think we've done more than enough. We've provided him more justice than he's given any of his wards.
Well, wouldn't it really solve all our problems and avoid a raising of old wounds just to let him go to the Ukraine?
Well, I want to respond to one thing that Mr. Foxman said. This is the area where we really disagree. You said it's almost irrelevant, the exculpatory evidence they threw out. I don't see how you can say that. This was a man who was being extradited for a capital crime. To destroy evidence...
Which he was found today not guilty.
That's beside the point. He was initially convicted and he spent 5 years on death row, and if his family hadn't unearthed this new evidence, he might have been hanged by now. The fact of the matter is that our Justice Department threw in the garbage evidence that could have exonerated or helped exonerate him of a capital crime for which our nation extradited him. That, to me, borders on very serious misconduct.
And if they extradited him to the Ukraine, would we have saved his life or killed him?
That also is not the issue. The issue is...
One of the issues is we're running out of time. Let me just mention that the Justice Department was asked to be with us, and they've declined. A final question or two. What effect do you think this court decision today will have on future investigations of the Nazi headhunting operation in the United States and around the world?
I think it's very favorable.
I think so.
Why?
Because it proves that a person can get a fair trial even on an extremely emotional issue such as this, and even in the face of eyewitness testimony.
I think in terms of precedent, it is so unique that it isn't really a precedent of one way or the other. But I think what's important is to again remember, in the state of Israel, in the place of the survivors, this man was found because of doubt to be relieved and released. And I think that's extraordinary.
His son, John Jr., says he's like so many immigrants. He just fleeing communism, came over on the boat seeking a better life.
I wish it was that simple.
That's not.
He was escaping communism because he was a collaborator.
If you could give John Jr. truth serum, he'd admit to you that he knows his father was in the SS.
Well, thank you both for being with us. An interesting story to talk with you both about, Mr. Dana and Mr. Foxman.
Again, the other major stories of this Thursday: 2 U.S. jets fired at suspected Iraqi missile sites. The U.S. economy grew by a modest 1.6% annual rate in the second quarter. General Motors reported a second quarter profit of $889 million. It lost almost that amount in the same period a year ago. And as expected, the Senate Judiciary Committee unanimously approved Ruth Bader Ginsburg's nomination to the Supreme Court.
Finally, an update about New York Mets relief pitcher Anthony Young. On Tuesday, Roger Rosenblatt did an essay about the 27-year-old right-hander who had uncomplainingly endured 27 straight defeats to become baseball's losingest pitcher. Last night, Young was 3 outs away from extending his infamous streak to 28.
And he drives it down the right field line. It is fair. It is Thompson.
But with the Mets down 4-3 against the Florida Marlins, his last-place team rallied for 2 runs in the 9th inning to win the game. Afterward, Young likened the year-long losing drought to having an entire zoo on his back. He also said the victory was like winning the World Series. Good night, Jim.
Good night, Roger. We'll see you tomorrow night with a visit by White House Counselor David Gergen, among Mark Shields and other things. I'm Jim Lehrer. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by PepsiCo. PepsiCo. And by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by New York Life, yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
I'm Nancy Marshall with OPB Radio. Tomorrow morning from 5 to 9 on OPB Radio, it's Morning Edition. Tomorrow, an interview with the leader of a group heading to Sarajevo to set up a peace camp. That's tomorrow morning on OPB Radio.
Video cassettes of the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour are available from PBS Video. Call 1-800-328-PBS-1.
This is PBS.
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by ODS Health Plan, the group medical plan that meets the needs of more than 600,000 Oregonians by providing a broad range of medical and dental coverage and responsive service.
There's been a murder, Mr. Henderson, in the Westgate car park.
Next on Mystery, Morse discovers another questionable motive and another life in danger.
The proper channels will take more time than I think we've got.
The secret of Bay 5B on Mystery.
Out of public television's tradition of great American storytelling comes the untold story of the epic quest for oil, money, and power. A look at the people who risk it all to win the prize. From the